together with Harriet, I'm the co-director of Platform WK, which is an which is a membership organization that fights for better art policy in the Netherlands. And we are organizing this 3-day event to touch on different subjects like collectivity and collaboration. We started with the first day about conflict in collaboration or collectives, as we experienced that a lot. The second day we touched on the financing of the collaborations. And today we will touch on unionizing, which is also very important, especially in the current time. Good to know is that Platform WK started in 2012 with the severe budget cuts. And unfortunately, we are in a weird moment of time. I to find out that just a collective, they are making a zine. You can go downstairs, see what things that you think art. They have publications with them, and if oh, this is really need to be collective effort from all of us. You will see that when we are having a break or things like that, or when you just visit the toilet, you will pass by them and you will see what they are up to. There is a photographer. So if you really don't want to be in a picture, please let us know, or the photographer himself, so he can try to avoid being, you're on the picture.
So I do all the thanks.
Yeah, you can do all the things. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You do it?
No, yeah, I thought to say that as today there is also a protest going on in Amsterdam, and we want to sort of show solidarity because it's very important to speak up to this way the media is framing certain items, and we just want to acknowledge that. Yeah, and then we can do the.
We'd just like to thank the Apple for hosting us the past 2 days, and also the Sandberg and Unsettling on Friday. We'd also like to thank the Creatieve Coalitie who have supported today's program, and also Stichting Doen who supported the whole program financially. Thank you to the hosts of the Apple cooked for us, and also thank you very much to the workshop hosts this morning, Koen and Seb, who ran a workshop on open letters, and then also to Lobby Locale, who ran a workshop about how to lobby. So we had a very informative morning. Lots of tools and experiences were shared, and that's kind of how we've come in from the morning session. Anything else? And maybe we talk about this afternoon. So today we've got a really nice program of talks. The first of all being Mia here, who's going to give us an introduction into union and history of union and artists unions. That will then be followed by Marije, who will talk about stichtings, or at least the kind of structures that these organizations or collectives can become part of, or can be. Then we'll then have a panel discussion moderated by Zoë Dankert, with various different representatives of different kinds of unions. So from kind of grassroots unions, organizations, or collectives that are formed out of a need that wasn't being addressed, but also artist unions such as Kunstenbond, and also organizations or collectives or coalitions that kind of encapsulate other unions. So we're going to try and kind of look at from the small scale kind of grassroots bottom up collectives organizing, and also the kind of larger often a bit more anonymous but also equally as important collectives that we thought would be nice to highlight. Welcome everyone coming in now. I'll just give you a moment to get seated. Okay. We also have the Void over here. which is a research project by the INC. They will be live recording and casting the audio of the talks today. Just so you know that you can access that later. Right, yeah, you can access that later. So that's going to be documented in that sense. Any other housekeeping? There will be drinks afterwards, so stick around. If and also, yesterday we had a really amazing talk by Kuba, and I can never pronounce his second name. It's terrible. Hmm? I can't. Shader. But he will also be giving a talk at Sans Serif. And that will be at 5:30. So you've got time to stay here until 5 and then get there for 5:30 to continue that conversation that started yesterday. Okay, I'm going to introduce Mia now and we'll get started. So Mia van der Bos is a artist, librarian, and writer. She's also one of our board members of Platform BK, and has a very specific or very interesting research into unionization within the arts. So she holds a lot of expertise in that realm. She's been giving these talks now, I think, a few times, but we always find it incredibly interesting and reinvigorating to look back at where artist unions and the history of artist unions come from and the importance of that. So we thought that'd be a really nice way to start this afternoon's programme. I won't keep us much longer because we'll run out of time, so I'll pass over the mic to Mia. And yeah, thanks again for all being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you all hear me? Yes. Good. Thank you, Jeanette and Harriet, for having me. And it's also really nice to have Dutch Art Institute here today. I actually started this research as part of my master's thesis for the Dutch Art Institute a few years ago. So that's a nice thing to have in the building today. So yeah, my presentation today is called Stronger Together, Artists, Unions and the Political Organisation of Precarious Workers. So I started my research into artists' trade unions as I was really interested as to whether the trade union model could be an effective form of organising for artists. So as I'm sure many of you know, trade unionism originated in factories during the Industrial Revolution, when wage labourers working in awful conditions organised on the basis of their collective interests and won many of the rights most workers enjoy today, such as the 8-hour work day and weekends, etc. So I wondered if trade unionism could be a suitable form of organising for artists who are self-employed and not wage labourers, but who still work in a largely unregulated industry without a collective labour agreement or basic entitlements such as paid holiday or sick leave. And the labour conditions of artists are stark when you consider the capital flows within the art industry. So last year, 2023, there was 60 billion euros in the art market, and yet the majority of practicing artists cannot afford to live on the basis of their practice. And the average income of artists across the world is very low, especially when I can hear a bit of feedback. Can everyone else hear that? No, it's good. And across the world, the average income of artists is very low, especially in comparison to other similarly educated groups. And I think this is something that artists understand intuitively, is that the way we work often speaks in a different language to the economy that we exist within. So to start off, I really wanted to understand how the mode of production and exchange of art makes it so hard for artists to earn a living. And to understand this, we first need to look at the position of artists within the capitalist economy. So this is my Economics 101, the artist under capitalism. So the first thing we need to take into account is that artists are not wage laborers. So artists are not hired and paid a wage to create their art. And in this way, the mode of production of an artwork creates no surplus value for a boss or company. So the fact that art does not create surplus value for an employer, which is the essential criteria of capitalist production, is the main reason that the production of art does not fit neatly within a capitalist system. So the mode of production of art still exists in a pre-capitalist form in most cases, such as patronage or simple commodity production. So that is of handmade goods sold by the people who made them. So the fact that art is not based on wage labour creates barriers to traditional labour organising, as artists do not share a direct employer to make demands to. We don't have a workplace, like a physical workplace where we can find each other and organise. And as artists are not creating surplus value for a boss, we have decreased bargaining power. For example, an artist strike does not have the same disruptive power as like a distribution centre of a supermarket or a factory, where companies lose expected income for every minute of the strike. So artists have less leverage than wage labourers. And the second thing that makes the economy of arts exceptional is that art is valued based on reputation. So when a work of art is sold on the art market, the economic value of an artwork cannot be rationally assessed by calculating labour time and the cost of materials. So a quick sketch by a renowned artist can fetch millions of dollars, while a laboriously constructed sculpture by a recent graduate can sell for less than was spent on producing it. So it's due to this that artist and academic Dave Beach claims that instead of art being priced based on value, it's instead reliant on non-market mechanisms, namely discourse and the accumulation of power and reputation in the art world. So the economic value of a work of art can be determined by things such as bibliography, exhibition history, an artist's past sales record, and the evaluation of the artist's body of work in academic, critical, and theoretical debates. So it's in this way that the art market is a speculative economy, like that of the financial market of stocks and bonds, where value is determined based on the confidence of a buyer that the value of their purchase, in this case a work of art, will increase over time. And the only thing to go on in making that judgment is the current reputation of the artist. In other words, the esteem that they are held within the art world, the esteem they are held in within the art world. So this means that artists have little control over whether their artwork will sell or at a fair price. And as with other speculative markets, the fate of an artist can change quickly, and this makes it challenging for artists to assess the value of their work. And it also poses a barrier to organising collectively, as artists are all in individualised relationships with the art market and are pitted against each other as competition. So these specific conditions need to be taken into account when artists are organising for workers' rights. And it makes it even more vital that any demands made by artists are done so collectively on as large a scale as possible and on behalf of artists who are selling work and having opportunities at that time and artists who are not. And the good news is that artists do have a rich history of organising based on their economic position, and that this contradicts the stereotype of artists as too individualistic or free-spirited to organise. Artists played crucial roles in the revolutionary movements of the 19th and 20th centuries. An example of that is the Paris Commune. So the Paris Commune was a socialist government which controlled Paris for 2 months in 1871, and it contained a significant federation of artists among its revolutionaries. So the Federation of Artists Manifesto was read aloud to a delegation of 400 artists during the Commune. They demanded the independence and dignity of every artist taken under the protection of all through the creation of a committee elected by the universal suffrage of artists. So as well as artists' control of museums and art education, they demanded access to culture as a right for all, not only the rich. And interesting to note that after the Commune was crushed by the National French Army, 10,000 of those who were convicted for that participation in the Commune were artisan and design workers. Yeah, there's a really interesting history, the massive involvement of artists in the Commune. So if you're interested in reading more about that, I recommend Communal Luxury by Kristen Ross. It's a really good book. Another example of radical organised artists is the Artists' Union. In 1933, a group of artists formed the Unemployed Artists Group in New York City, and this later became known as the Artists' Union. This group organised demonstrations and campaigned for local, state, and federal programs to create work for artists during the Great Depression. And as a result of their campaign, the US government, created the Public Works of Art Project, which was a six-month work relief project commissioning artists to create public artworks. And this later expanded into the Federal Arts Project.
And from then on, the artists' union's main objective became to make the program permanent and to expand publicly subsidized work for artists. So it's in this way that the artists' union became the de facto bargaining entity for thousands of artists who were employed by the Federal Arts Project. And when the programs began to be curtailed at the end of 1936 and mass layoffs were expected, the artists' union fought militantly to retain their jobs through protests and an occupation of the Federal Arts Project's offices. They believed that government subsidized wage labor was the key to economic and creative freedom for artists. As they stated in their manifesto, the state can eliminate once and for all the unfortunate dependence of American artists on the caprice of private patronage. So the Artists' Union was ultimately not successful in maintaining the Federal Arts Project, but I think they're a strong example of artists advocating for and defending a social arts policy that acknowledged the misalignment between the artistic mode of production and capitalism. So the Netherlands, as I'm sure many of you know, had a social art policy for much of the 20th century. This was the Beeldende Kunstenaarsregeling, or the Visual Artist Scheme. So the Visual Artist Scheme existed in some form from 1949 to 1987, and it provided a social safety net for artists in the form of a benefit payment in return for donated works of art once or twice a year. And there was substantial pressure for collective social provisions for artists, and that had originally come from the Professional Association of Visual Artists, the Beroepsvereniging van Beeldende Kunstenaars, the BBK, which formed in Amsterdam in May 1945 out of artists groups who had been involved in the resistance in World War II. This included the Socialist Artists Circle, the Union of Artists for the Defense of Culture, and the Committee for Artists and Intellectuals. So the BBK was crucial in the defense of the Visual Artists Scheme throughout its existence, and they led the opposition against proposed cuts, with their protest actions, including a weeks-long occupation of the Rijksmuseum in front of Rembrandt's The Night Watch. However, despite their resistance, the Visual Artists Scheme was eventually cut under the neoliberal restructuring of the Netherlands in the 80s, and was replaced by stricter and time-limited social security schemes for artists in the 90s and 2000s. And these were eventually terminated in the 2012 budget cuts, which was also the environment in which Platform BK came into existence. So I think in these examples from history, we can see the imaginative capacity of artists, not just in the symbolic realm of their work, but in the real world of political organizing. So these artist groups faced problems that we are facing now, including economic crises, precarious working lives, and hostile government policies. And they express themselves in a language of solidarity with an understanding that artists require a level of collectively organized support that cannot be met by the art market. That's the BBK occupation in front of the Night Watch. So in recent years, trade unionism has begun to recapture the imagination of workers. So in the Netherlands, we've seen over the last year large trade union strikes by essential workers in transport and distribution centres. There's an article there that says we've had the most strikes in 50 years in the Netherlands. And also in the United States, we are witnessing multinational companies such as Amazon and Starbucks forming new grassroots trade unions. So the recent uptick in unionization campaigns has also reached art institutions, mostly in the US, with lots of museums over the past 5 years forming grassroots unions. So I found these movements encouraging to witness, as the general trend of trade union membership and institutional power over the past 50 to 70 years has been one of decline. This has mostly been due to neoliberal reforms, which deindustrialized developed economies and removed key union strongholds, and also due to the deregulation of labor markets, which has increased casualized, insecure working conditions, zero-hour contracts, self-employment, remote working, all which create a hostile environment for unions. So these changes in the labour market in general have put an increasing number of workers in a similar position to artists in insecure work or self-employment with the reduced bargaining power. So more people are in, similar position to artists. And art historian Angela Dimitrakaki claims that the positioning of artists as workers has been used by neoliberal governments to provide a justification as to why, quote, a group of people cannot make a living despite participating in the economy. The artist is interpolated as a worker upon recognition that unemployment, underemployment, casualization, and so forth are trends on the job market overall, and that all workers should expect to be affected and to live out these trends. So the question arises, if more workers are now in the same situation as artists in precarious work, self-employment, etc., how do artists and other precarious workers organize within these labour market conditions? So one idea is that of the social union. So that's an idea proposed by writer Sean May in his book Capital in Crisis, Trade Unionism and the Question of Revolutionary Agency. So a social union pivots away from exclusively representing the interests of an increasingly dwindling section of the working class who are in full-time permanent employment, and it instead focuses on representing the interests of the class as a whole, which includes casual, freelance, and unemployed workers. And it also broadens the scope of the struggle to outside the workplace, to organise around issues such as education, healthcare, and housing. So to represent a social union here, I chose an Australian example, the New South Wales Builders Labourers Federation's green bans in the 1970s. So these were the world's first massive trade union strikes that were purely for environmental reasons. So the social union was based on the principle of the social responsibility of labour, that workers had the right to insist their labour not be used in harmful ways. So in the case of the New South Wales Builders Labourers Federation, the unionised builders refused to work on building projects that would have a negative impact on the environment, in solidarity with resident and environmental groups. So as the building industry in Australia at the time was fully unionised with a no union ticket, no work policy, the union had a great amount of power. And between 1971 and 1974, the union conducted 53 green band strikes. And that has protected Sydney's green spaces, heritage sites, and public housing from developers, and which we still enjoy today, all of these amazing buildings and parks that still exist thanks to union official Jack Mundy. And he described the philosophy of the green bands as such. We want to build, however, we prefer to build urgently required hospitals, schools, and other public utilities, high quality flats, units, and houses that are designed with adequate concern for the environment. Though we want all our members employed, we will not just become robots directed by builder developers who value the dollar at the expense of the environment. More and more, we are going to determine which buildings we will build. The environmental interests of 3 million people are at stake and cannot be left to developers and building employers whose main concern is making profit. Progressive unions like ours therefore have a very useful social role to play in its citizens' interest, and we intend to play it. And in terms of housing and development, artists have a well-documented role in gentrification, which displaces working class communities. And therefore, artists can mobilise as a crucial ally in struggles over affordable housing. So an example of this is the Boyle Heights Alliance Against Art Washing and Displacement, which is based in Los Angeles, and it is a coalition of tenants unions and artist groups who agitate to have galleries leave Boyle Heights to prevent gentrification and to retain the cultural and class composition of the majority Latinx area. One of their organisers has said, many artists and cultural workers in Los Angeles are sick and tired of being used in the process of gentrification and are seeking meaningful ways to refuse their participation in the cultural economy of displacement. We are sick of our friends and neighbours and own families getting harassed and evicted, and we are also fighting to reclaim our creativity from the jaws of complicity. We are tired of our art practices being co-opted to prop up other people's speculative development interests. We want to take this crucial moment to redefine which artistic solidarities and critical social movements are needed in Los Angeles today. So I find this to be a great example of organised solidarity between artists and residents who recognise their shared interests and are working together to maintain the affordability of the area that they live in. So this is also a good example of the idea of a social union. Another example is in the work of artist Matthijs de Bruyne, who has done a lot of work with the FNV Cleaners Union. In 2010, the artist was invited by the union to collaborate with the cleaners to create a visual identity for their campaigns, with a focus on rebuilding the historic connection between the labour movement and art and culture. So a significant number of cleaners are self-employed or work through temporary employment agencies. So there are parallels to be drawn with the arts and the possibility of shared tactics and mutual solidarity. So the Cleaners Union held 3 major strikes, one in 2010, 2012 and 2014. And the 2010 strike was the longest strike in the Netherlands since 1933. So the strikes succeeded in achieving a wage increase of 5%, more security for temporary workers and paid sick leave. So their successes cannot be solely attributed to their visual campaign, but when looking back at the media attention the campaigns received and the public interest it garnered, there was a definite impact achieved through their collaboration with an artist to create a compelling visual narrative to their struggle. So I think this is another good example of an artist working to their strengths in solidarity with another group of precarious workers. And another thing we need to talk about is financial capitalism. So that's something that contemporary labour organising really needs to think about. So financial capitalism is defined by the preference of those with capital to invest it in the stock market to generate profit. So prioritising shareholders over productive capital. So they invest in the stock market and not in factories and manufacturing and services. So with this source of economic growth increasingly fixed in financial markets, union strategies like strikes can decrease in effectiveness as companies have become more focused on generating income from their shareholders than their workers. So in this environment, new tactics are required. And writers Alice Martin and Annie Quick have written a book about this, Unions Renewed Building Power in the Age of Finance, and they suggest new strategies such as leveraging shareholder power through reputational sabotage and collectively utilising our power to withhold payments to finance capital. So that's through rent strikes and debt strikes. An example of this in the arts was the gold fees student strike in 2021. So in 2021, a group of more than 200 students at Goldsmiths University of London held a tuition fee strike in which they withheld payments in solidarity with their teachers who were facing compulsory redundancy, and they demanded reimbursements for disruptions to their education during COVID. So the announcement of the fee strike coincided with 3 weeks of industrial action by their lecturers and tutors who demanded that senior management at Goldsmiths cease moving ahead with plans for 52 redundancies among academic and administrative staff. A student describing the reason for their participation in the tuition fee strike said that as students, we are acutely aware of how much we pay in fees and that this money often goes straight into the pockets of banks and financiers rather than university staff. So the combined actions of students and staff was partially successful in resisting the restructuring. The number of staff to lose their job was reduced to 17, so 35 jobs were saved. So this example of students' tuition fee striking shows the potential for solidarity between workers and non-workers, in this case students, to achieve their mutual aims in the case of a good quality arts education. And it also demonstrates the power that consumers, debtors, and renters have to withhold payment in order to produce change, but that this can only work if done so on a large scale and collectively. And of course, another incredible example of recent social unionism has been the student and staff organised university encampments in solidarity with Palestine, which demand that ties be broken with Israeli institutions, I should say. So I have pictures here I took at my local encampment in Radboud University in Nijmegen, and images from the KBK Student Union Instagram, of which fellow Platform BK board member Alina Lupu is a founder. So the Student Union succeeded, the Car Student Union succeeded in getting their demand met for the Car to break ties with Bezalel Art University in Jerusalem. And this achievement, and I think the achievement of all the encampments worldwide, has demonstrated the power of organised students to shape political narratives despite massive pushback. So to wrap up, this is the summary of my key points. So the artist is not a wage labourer who directly produces surplus value for an employer, and this places a structural limitation on our bargaining power as organised workers. So this is why it's essential that any demands made on behalf of artists have to be done so collectively, involving as many artists and art workers as possible. And in our current economy, more people are in the same position as artists, that is, in insecure work. And this presents a great opportunity for artists to form alliances with other precarious workers. And that strategically organised solidarity actions increase our chances of success in creating better working and living conditions for artists by recognising that we share interests with other people in insecure work and by combining our campaigns. So all of this to say we are stronger together. Thank you. Time for questions. Oh, yeah. Maybe I'll leave this up then. No one has a question. Is there anybody who has a question? Yeah. Oops,
Just a small question about the artists organizing here in the Netherlands for this, I guess, kind of basic income in exchange for work, for like 2 works a year. You mentioned that this was stopped in the 80s. And I was wondering if artists did anything when it was stopped, tried to organize, and whether that resulted into anything.
Not that I know of. I think Sep in the audience could answer this better than I could, but yeah, there was pressure the whole time to maintain the visual artist scheme, but I think also there was a lot of negative press about it as well. At the time, it was seen as like artists were being lazy, people were being subsidized for not doing much. And there was also a bit of pushback that it was creating low quality art. So also within the art world, there was a lot of criticism of the visual artist scheme at the time. And also when it was finally cut in 2012, there was, yeah, I believe books written about how it was creating not the best, motivation for artists to be innovative and make new work. That, and to get opportunities, the sort of discourse around artists need to be pushed into being entrepreneurs and, and that's how the best way to get, innovative work. So, yeah, but there was pushback the whole time from the BBK to maintain the visual artist scheme. But yeah, with the neoliberal restructuring at the time, yeah, it was inevitable. Yeah.
So it's different ways to get, the fair pay, the normal pay for the artists. But yeah, the special like the WIC I think, but that was a bit before the time I became really active, was not a thing that we really could fight for anymore. Is that true? Yeah.
But fair pay is quite different, no? And because it does, in a sense, it does turn the artist into a wage laborer because it is a contract between the art institution and the artist, and it's a typical kind of exchange, capitalist kind of exchange of a service that the artist provides almost for the art institution, which then no gives the artist money. And if the artist is not showing at an institute, it's like almost saying also it's not art, or you're not an artist if you're not showing at an art institution. No, I mean, because fair pay is about artists working at institutions. It's so if they are, it's not. So if you are not making work for an institution or showing it at an institution, you're not getting fairly paid.
No, in my opinion, fair pay is a broader idea. That means that if you professionally made art is being professionally paid, and it's not only about institutions, but it was enrolled from the institutions, and it's the idea that in the whole society art should be paid. And of course, it's a different thing than the WIC or than the other regulations that were, but I think the in the sorry, in the social things that were happening in the society, that was the choice for the United Artists to fight for this thing. And the special the WIC structures, that was not possible to uh, to hold. You know, that was a lost cause, I think. Yeah.
In Belgium, this still exists, the basic support for artists. So in that sense, saying that it's a lost cause in general is also giving into the neoliberal narrative. That's just very brief.
I just have a question. So you mentioned how artists are not wage laborers, and also really hard to define specific value as well, depending on the artist, and also it can vary a lot. I'm wondering, do you have a specific, if we're trying to think of something that doesn't really exist or might exist in different forms, but maybe not in a capitalist form, how would you argue that artists should defend or advocate in favor of a different way of being perceived? And on which basis should they defend that? Oh, we should get paid like this amount for these reasons, or we provide something that's valuable, maybe not in a capitalist way, like are we providing a service or something? But I feel like, especially now with here in the Netherlands, with the government who wants to cut funds, how can artists promote themselves in a way where maybe like more mainstream or regular people could be, yeah, oh, this makes sense, or this is a way where we can come into negotiations within a way where artists feel confident and heard, but also where a negotiation can happen as well. Is there a sort of, are those like system applied in a systematic way that can be put, or it's not something that really exists, a sort of framework that exists to have those discussions?
So yeah, it's difficult because we're sort of expected to speak within the language of capitalism to get the normal people to understand what we do, and that's sort of buying into the framework of neoliberal capitalism to say, yeah, we are just the same as every other worker. We provide a service, we get paid for that. Personally, I wouldn't want to buy into that narrative. I think there's an intrinsic value of creating art. I think that every artist understands that you do it because it means something to you, and it means something to the people around you, and it's a way of forming meaning of in the world and your own, your soul. But yeah, so I think art has something that cannot be quantified. It can't be like talked about in instrumental language of, yeah, we create this much money for the economy. And yeah, I just don't think we should buy into that narrative. And I think people understand, people that enjoy art. Maybe you can't convince everyone that art is important, because not everyone enjoys going to a museum or consuming art, but everyone enjoys something that makes their life worth living, which is usually something creative, something that they can put themselves into. So I think in an ideal society, art is something that everyone can take part in. It's something that you can put yourself into. It's a way that you can see yourself reflected back to yourself. Like, yeah, it's just a way of being and a way of communicating, I think. And yeah, I don't know if there's a way to communicate that to everyone. I don't think we should be trying to get every single person to think that art is important in the way that we maybe do. I don't think that's necessary either. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the idea that fair pay is immediately co-opted back into the neoliberal world, because I was thinking that fair pay is in a way like it's dividing up the economic pie of an institution. And actually what we want to do is scale up fair pay socially, and then we come to basic income, which is like, yeah, all artists are valuable, but actually all human beings are valuable and need a basic income like artists. And yeah, anyway, it's not really a question, but maybe I'm interested. Have you come across any examples where artist movements are aligning with other citizens groups around basic income claims?
There's the co-op that I think it's just called Co-op. It's based in New York City, and they're really involved with thinking about alternative economies for artists, but not only for artists. I'll look it up and I can show you after. I think it's called Artist Co-op or Co-op. But they're looking into things like time banking and things that people can use that are alternative economies to share resources and to make a living outside of the capitalist system, but it's really based around for artists. But yeah, I don't know about the basic income, because it can also be like a new form of feudalism is like some criticisms of the basic income that we'll all become like low level serfs, and then there's like billionaires, and then we all live on like a very low income. So I think we need to be ambitious also in our claims and like the things that we want for ourselves.
Thanks. I think we're going to continue this conversation during the day, so we can think further about it. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
We will do a quick turnaround for the computer, and then we invite Marije to the stage. Yeah, we could, yeah.
If you want to go get a coffee, come back and the presentation will be ready. There's coffee and biscuits downstairs. I mean, I don't have to say this. You guys are always free to go get a coffee.
So we are going to continue with a second presentation from Marije Baalman, who's also an artist, but also very active in multiple collectives. And we talked a lot about like how do you form a collective or even an association, or what are like these things that happen and will come towards you. And that's why we thought let's share this information. And yeah, I think it's I have the feeling it's a bit practical, kind of, right? Yeah, more or less. And yeah, maybe you can explain yourself better, like where you were involved in, and but maybe that's also part of your presentation. So I will just give the word to you and enjoy.
Thanks. Thanks for inviting me to give this talk. Yes, I've been involved in forming a number of organizations. I'm part of IAI, which I actually was not part of the forming and founding, although I witnessed part of that. IAI is an artists organization in The Hague, and I think over the 10 years, we managed to grow from like a group of recent graduates from the KBK to actually being a structurally funded cultural institution. I think we are the only association that is supported on that level. Then I'm also part of and co-founder of an organization that supports collective housing and tries to actually get real estate off the market under the slogan like houses are for people, not for profit. This is an organization called Vrijkoop, which we founded in 2019. And by now there's 5 or 6 housing collectives that are have been realized or have been reshaped to the structure that we created. One of them is the new Bijesdorp, which is a bit in that direction, which is a housing cooperative with both living and workspaces for artists and activists. And part of that is also another association that I co-founded called Grond, which is sort of using, like, making shared use of the spaces on the ground floor and organizing a program there. I think I have them. Well, and then also yeah, I think I got them all. So that's sort of where I'm coming from, and the experience that I have in being active in organizations. So my talk, I will sort of focus on how do you actually form an organization, and how do you then formalize an organization. And this is I will start with some interactive question, like an interactive question, just to try and debunk some stuff. So if you want to start an organization in a cultural field in the Netherlands, you have to create a foundation, a stichting. Who has gotten this advice when they wanted to start an organization? Quite a few people. It's not true. Like, think it really depends on what you want to do, and most of all, how you want to do it and with who. So there's a couple of things before you start an organization you need to think about. So there's questions like, what do you actually want to do? What is the goal of the organization? With whom do you want to do that? And with those people, how do you want to make decisions? Who are the stakeholders of your organization? And what about the money? To put it very plain. So yeah, these are sort of, as I said, like, what is the goal of your organization? This can be sort of an idealistic goal. Some artists, some examples are like with IAI, the goal is to support artists with a specific focus. For IAI, that was supporting artists working in the field of art science, or do a certain type of projects, develop a cultural program and space at a certain location. So this was for Grond, was like the starting point. provide workspaces for artists. So this might be if you are going to run a broedplaats or an incubator space. Or of course, if you want to become a union to lobby for the rights of artists or curators, cultural workers, you name it. So these different types, like of goals, will of course mean or give insight on also what people you need to find to work with and how you will organize that. So the people involved would be then artists working in that field, or the curators, or artists working in the building, or the artists who need to unionize and lobby. So yeah, this gives a focus of who the members or who will be part of your organization. And also a question to already think about in the beginning is like, how large do you imagine your organization to become? I mean, if you're focused around a building, there's a certain limitation how many people you can get in there. But if you're starting a union, you of course want to have as many people as possible to make a fist together. Figuratively, of course. I don't want to incite violence. So how do you? So then the question is like, how do you want to organize? How do you want to work together? How do you want to take decisions in the organization? What sort of roles will there be? And another related question, maybe what's in it for whom? So who are the stakeholders? What are the stakes in the organization? So some examples, like the artists whose work is supported, gives a way to produce and present their work, which then gives income to them. Workers in the organization, they will also get income, but also fulfillment of doing meaningful work. The renters will have resources and space to do their work. Curators maybe have a common platform to do larger projects together. But also, for example, there's other stakeholders which maybe are not a direct part of the organization, but could become in one way or another, and they will benefit. For example, the audience or the neighborhood where you are based. They will get a space to experience and participate in culture, to meet each other, and basically have a improvement of life. Then a question you need to think about when you organize, like, what sort of costs do you need to make to realize your goal? And where is the income coming from to cover these costs? So this can be, if you say like, if you have a union, basically the concept is you get membership fees, and with that you can pay a few people that can go and spend their time on lobbying. And maybe there's subsidies you will apply for additional activities. And if you start like an artist like II, the idea was like, well, we can do shows together, so our income is then coming from actually presenting venues, because we are doing it together rather than providing only one piece. We can actually offer several pieces and sort of promote each other or negotiate on behalf of each other. Also something to think about, like, what do you want to happen when the income is more than the cost? Like, what happens to any surplus? Also, what happens if your income is lower than the cost? How do you deal with that? So another sort of tricky question. This is also something you maybe find often, that only like for larger subsidies, only foundations, stichtingen can get cultural funding. Who has been told this? That's also not true. For most cultural funds, you can either be a foundation or an association, as long as you are a non-profit organization. And this is something that urgently needs to be changed on the website of Cultuur en Ondernemen, because they hardly mention this option of creating an association for creating an organization in the cultural field. So yeah, this needs an email or more. So, well, a little disclaimer, if you didn't get it yet, I have a personal preference for associations. So what is the difference? So a stichting, usually there's a founder who has a great idea, has a great goal in mind, and this goal is defined in the bylaws, so in the founding rules of the stichting. And actually, a lot of like private funds that you find, like, are often founded based on the will of someone who had a lot of money and they wanted their money to be spent after their death on culture. So, and I think for that, a stichting is a great form. Like, it's one idea, it will not change. It's just you need some people to give the money to this particular cause. For actually doing things together, and especially the together thing, maybe the association is a better form. So with an association, you also define a goal. This is done by the founding members. It's written down also in the bylaws. Then with a stichting, there's a board that is appointed. There will probably be some regulations on how the board is appointed, but basically their function is to ensure that the goal is pursued. And since there's actually no other people within a stichting that can decide anything for the stichting, they sort of appoint their successors and everything. So in a vereniging, the members make decisions together in the General Assembly, which includes appointing a board. In both cases, the legal entities are non-profit, which means that no profit can actually go back to the founder or the workers in it. Of course, they can be paid for work they do, but they cannot take a share in sort of profit. And that's the same for associations. So where it gets tricky, I find, like with a stichting, as a founder or worker in the association, or in the stichting, you have no way to influence what the board does or who is on the board, how decisions are made. With the vereniging, you are part of a democratic body that makes decisions together. And you can define in the bylaws what decisions the board can make and which have to be made by the General Assembly. So actually, as a member, you have power on how things are done. Yeah, with the cultural governance, where they say pas toe or leg uit, like apply or explain. With IAI, we've had to do a lot of explaining because they only describe models for stichtingen, for foundations, with either like a board that oversees employed directors that take care of daily business, or a supervisory board that oversees an executive board that directs the organization. With an association, you can have both a board and also a supervisory board. The last one is optional, but it can be useful to also get advice from people who are a bit further away from the day-to-day business of the organization. So if you have both, you have actually two checks and balances. You have sort of checks on what the board is doing from two different sides. So the members check that the board is carrying out their tasks and can appoint and fire the board members. But also the supervisory board advises and can also give feedback back to the members saying like, hey, the board is not functioning well, so then the members can take action. And usually the supervisory board members are external to the association. But they are also appointed by the members. So the members look for people who could have good insights that the organization can benefit from. So yesterday there was a lot of, I did not have time to join yesterday, but there was a lot of talk about the different economic models. So you might wonder, but what about a cooperative? Like, why not be a co-op? If you look sort of at the legality, things of that, you have the legal entity of a coöperatieve vereniging in the Netherlands. But it is a for-profit legal entity. So in a coöperatieve vereniging, the basis is that profit or other economic benefits can go back to its members. So, and the sharing of the economics is part of the basic goal of the cooperative. Like you have a lot of energy co-ops coming now, and like everyone benefits like from the solar power being sold, or the electricity generated by a windmill that's owned by a cooperative. Like all the members of the cooperative, they get money from the windmill turning. And in the cultural field, a coöperatieve vereniging will usually not be eligible, as many funds only allow for non-profit organizations to apply. But of course, even within an association, you can pay people who are working, and you can still share resources. So you can just not do it in a sort of profit way. And that's what in Dutch they call vereniging met onderneming, which means that you are carrying out activities for which you obtain income and for which you pay for materials and labor. You can also have people on payroll and employ people or hire freelancers. And that can also be the members. And you can also be eligible for VAT, meaning that you charge VAT on invoices you issue and you can deduct that on costs that you make. So having said all this, basically, if you want to organize things together and make decisions together, so have a democratic basis to your organization, you should make an association. If you want a few people deciding everything, go for a stichting. So how do you do that? Well, it's a lot of talking. So that's maybe the downside. It's a lot of talking. Of course, you can't do it on your own. A vereniging means that you unite yourself with others. So you need to gather people that you want to work together with towards a shared goal. Or maybe you already have a small group. You want to increase that group. But maybe with a small group, you already start defining that goal further. Maybe you're on your own, but you think like, well, my idea is so great, I will find people. If the idea is great, you probably will. Then you spend a lot of time to talk about what the shared goals and interests are, how you want to reach these goals. And basically, you do this a couple of rounds to really make sure you're on the same page. And then you can write that down as the start of your bylaws. Okay, this is the goal of the association, and this is how we will try and achieve the goal. Then you should also think a little bit more like, okay, who can actually become a member of my of our association, and what do they get out of it? So who is eligible, like having some basic regulations, like maybe if you only want natural persons, meaning like people and not other legal entities. Or maybe you want to have both, but having a specific type of legal entities, or legal entities with specific goals that align. So that's something to think about. Then you have to think about the procedure. How do you accept new members? Who makes the decision? And how do you make the decision? And if it's, yeah, if you want to work together in a building, maybe you want to have some commit or actually make sure you first meet people or and then make a decision together and have everyone agree, but maybe in a union you have a work group that checks like, okay, does this person meet the basic criteria, and then maybe it's easier, or the threshold to become a member is lower. Then it's good to, yeah, think about what you expect from the member. This can be yeah, from just paying a membership fee to actually spending time working in the organization. What do they get in return? So that might be actually being allowed to use the shared spaces and resources, or being part of, yeah, defining the artistic direction of the organization. And also like how can a member cancel their membership? And maybe in some cases it's like, okay, you say like I quit and that's it. But maybe if you rent out spaces, you want to say like, well, you can quit, but you still have to pay for 3 months. So we can find someone to replace you. So you can make some rules about that. And also important, I believe on Friday you also talked about conflict. So also important, how can you cancel the membership of a member? Like, it could be that, okay, if the contribution is not paid for a certain amount of time, the membership is cancelled. But also maybe if someone's really causing conflicts and you can't function anymore as an association, you also want to have a way to get someone out again. So if you figure all that out, you can define that in your bylaws. And then there's a whole part about decision making, which is also about how do you create the agenda. And there are some standards sort of in the law, like the Dutch law. Of course, they want to know who they can sort of hold responsible for what this group of people is doing. So by the standard law, like a lot of power is given to the board. And maybe you want to change that for your organization. But yeah, sort of like how do you create the agenda of what is decided on in general assemblies? And so often there's a certain amount of members that can call for a meeting. But you can make that more loose, like you can even, yeah, depending on what sort of organization you are, you can say like, well, any member can call for a general assembly, or there's a work group that prepares them. So it's good to think about how you want to do that. And that also depends on the size of your organization. Then it's a question, how do you want to make decisions? Yeah, sort of the standard democratic way is to have a majority vote, but maybe you also want to use methods like the consent method, which, yeah, if you learn how to do it, actually gets you into a very different way of making decisions rather than sort of convincing enough people of your great plan. You actually work together to get input from everyone and actually usually get to much better ideas. So it's much more about a dialogue than a discussion. On specific topics, if you have majority voting or in general, you may want to define a different type of majority. For example, changing the bylaws is usually you need like 2/3 of 3/4 of the members to agree because it's such a foundational change. And usually then there's also a requirement for a certain amount of people to be present in the decision making. And if you do use a method of consent, you may also want to include an emergency procedure in case you can't reach a decision. But no decision is also harmful. I mean, this is a tough one, but you can be in a situation where if you can't get everyone to consent, there might still be like, I don't know if it's about yeah, something that might stop the functioning of the organization. You need to have a way to go back to a majority vote if necessary. Yeah, so also how the generally assembles are called for, like how far in advance should the agenda be clear? How are the members informed? Who will be chairing the meeting? And also rather precise how decisions are made, how the voting takes place, and how the outcome is recorded. In some cases, for certain types of votes, when it's about persons, maybe you want to have the votes written down and not by holding hands up, because it can be, yeah, a bit sensitive. So, yeah, that's something you need to define. And you need to define what the role of the board members is. So officially, the board members are the persons who are liable for the doings of the association. And yeah, standard, they are expected to take executive decisions. So you need to think what fits to your organization in what sort of decisions the board can take on its own, and for which decisions it always needs to go to the General Assembly. And this has to do with sort of balancing being able to move forward at a reasonable pace with certain things, but also keeping all the members involved. So it's, yeah, defining how much power the board gets and how much power you put with the members. Usually there's also things about how you appoint the board. Often it's the board comes from the members, what the maximum term is of appointment, to ensure that you don't have the same person or same persons on the board all the time. Maybe you have other requirements. You might, for example, want that I don't know, people are not couple like partner, like romantic partners on the same board, because that can make things a bit fuzzy. You can define how a board member steps back and how the association can suspend or fire a board member. Then also how the board takes decisions, and specific attention also how to avoid conflicts of interest. So also define that if a board member is personally affected by a decision or has a certain like gain from a decision, then maybe that's a moment that person doesn't take part in the deliberation, or the decision is moved to the General Assembly. You can also, in the bylaws, also define some other aspects of the working structure. For example, that you have work groups that get certain mandates and that prepare topics and bring them to the assembly, or that you hire certain like employees to take care of different things, and also about the supervisory board. So these are all things you define in the bylaws. There's a lot of worst case scenario thinking that you have to do in the when writing these things, because you have to figure out how do you want to handle things when it goes wrong. So how do you want to take decisions when there's conflicts? And how do you ensure that the association can still function and continue achieving its goal when there's a conflict? And what measures can you take to do that? And in the worst case, that means like exonerating a member or suspending a member so you can move forward. And this is a saying I got from someone in Germany, and it works very well in German. Verträge macht man, wenn man sich verträgt, which is like you make agreements when you can stand each other, when you, yeah, it only really works in German, but it really makes sense. So you have to, for conflict resolution, you have to make, like define a procedure together when you're not in conflict yet. So, because then if you have that procedure, you have a guidebook of how to get through the conflict. So if you have that procedure, then and you decided on these procedures before you got into conflict, then you can follow this procedure to yeah, to resolve the conflict or part ways in that process. So that's important. So payments of membership, there's two standard ways in verenigingen. So one is an inlay, an inleg. This is like an interest-free loan to the association that is paid back when a member steps out. And then you have either an annual or a monthly contribution that is used to cover basic costs of the organization. And usually the height of that is defined when an annual budget is made for the next year. It's also useful to define other sources of income in the bylaws. So that can be also be like donations and gifts or inheritances. It's useful to put that one in because if you didn't define it, then you need to check if you actually want to accept them. In Dutch, it's erfstellingen en legaten. I didn't have time to figure out the legal nuances in English of those. I think with erfstelling, it can also be a negative one, so that's why they're a bit more tricky. Subsidies, income from activities, other income. Okay, and then you go to the notary. So there's a lot of thinking you have to do before you go to the notary. If you go too early, he will give you some standard thing that doesn't fit your organization. Because they often have a template for bylaws of associations. I learned that not all notaries like groups that come up with their own stuff. So it's good to inquire with several notaries to find one that likes verenigingen and likes to think along and deviate from a template. So one that wants to take a bit of time to think with you. And they will also check and tell you if certain things are not in line with the law and yeah, work with you to resolve that. So find a friendly notary that actually likes to think along with you. That's sort of the advice there. They're hard to find though. My favorite one just stopped, so I'm. There's also some things you may want to define into internal regulations in Dutch huishoudelijk reglement rather than in the bylaws. Because you can change them more easily. And in the bylaws, you can say like, this and this will be regulated in the internal regulations. Yes, because these internal regulations you can change just by the General Assembly, and they're usually more sort of on a very practical level. So towards the current operation, bylaws are sort of the foundation that stays the same and what you fall back on. Yeah, but I now after 10 years we're working on changing the bylaws because we're now quite different than we were in 2013. But our internal regulations, we review them each year, roughly. I went quite quick, so there will be a lot of time for questions. So after you found it, one of the first steps, get a bank account. Seems really easy. It will take you months. This has to do with laws against terrorism and whitewashing and all that. So banks are very careful. So they do a lot of checks and they take a lot of time. So keep that in mind. Don't think like, oh, I go to the notary and then I can get a bank account and then I can apply to that subsidy. It'll take a while. Yeah, like you need at least once a year to do a general assembly to decide on the budget for the year to come and to close the budget of the past year. But most of all, of course, do your thing together. That's what you have to do after founding. So I think that was what I had to say, and then we can talk and all that. If you want to know more about the different organizations, I put all the links there. Next week we have a concert at Grond, so come. It's not too far from here, so if you got here, it's only 10 minutes more by bike. I saw a question there.
Just a very simple and concrete question. It might be hard to find a notary that's really fitting and that's cheap because they're really expensive. You have any tips?
No, as I said, like the one I really liked, where we founded Vrijkoop and Baaiensdorp and all that, he just stopped. Although his kantoor is still is taken over, but that one was in Amersfoort. So and the one I'm working with the statute change in for IAI is actually quite stroperig, like quite difficult to work with. So I don't have good tips, unfortunately, for a nice one at the moment.
I worked with a notary called Kaap. Oh, Kaap Advocaten. They're quite good, but expensive. But they also have a specialty in working with cultural organizations, so they know how to integrate the cultural codes into the bylaws. Yeah, they were really supportive, but we were almost bankrupt right from the start. So, yeah.
I thought also it's good to add that, as we said in the beginning, Platform is a membership organization, and as you now saw, also there's members have power to say stuff, and we do have all these annual meetings. So it's really good to show up on the annual meetings because you can voice actually things that are concerning you. I just wanted to add that because maybe you're like, yeah, okay, what is this? So it's also good to know for in the panel discussion, which will take place after this, there are also a lot of associations involved starting and bigger and smaller, which is quite interesting to see how they sort of deal with all these questions that are proposed. Are there any more questions? I didn't want to take up all the time.
I have a question from like the exact opposite side. So when the foundation or the association stops to exist, what's the comparison of the whole process? If like we talked a lot about establishing it, but like when you want to close down, do you have an overview of what's happening in that sense? Like what's better in a way, or what are the options?
I mean, this is also something, yeah, I figured I had 43 slides. I had enough for 45 minutes, so that's where I stopped. But usually, you also do define in the bylaws what happens when you stopped the association, and with the stichting, there will also be something like that. So that involves also like how the decision to stop is made, and that's usually also you need to have like a large majority of members agreeing to stop. And then there's also you also define what happens with the money that's left in the association, and usually, yeah, there cannot be going more money back to members than the inlay they put in. So what usually happens is that a certain cause is defined that aligns with the goal of the organization. That the money will be donated towards another organization that pursues similar goals or something like that, and that someone will be the keeper of the money until the money is has gone there. So that's usually what is defined in the bylaws regarding that. And I guess for stichtingen, that's also similar. There's a definition of when it stops.
Thank you. Do you know of any examples of transforming from a foundation to an association?
Yeah, yeah, I sort of initiated that process now at VD4X, or I gave the suggestion to do that. So VD4X is the incubator space in which AI is housed, which is actually a space that is shared by 3 organizations, by Locatie Z or Daisy Chain. Daisy Chain, okay, it's formerly known as Locatie Z, and SW2. They were originally at the Sammersweg 2. So yeah, when they obtained the building in 2017, yeah, they needed a legal entity to rent the space together, and now they sort of realize that actually although there was the will that sort of each organization is represented in the board, with the stichting there was actually no way to then ensure like the democratic influence of people in those organizations or these organizations in the stichting. So now we're looking to change to a vereniging, of which then these 3 legal entities will be a member. And as I understood, yeah, it is possible, but I believe we have to go to court to actually make the change. But in that way, you can keep all the assets within the organization. And I don't expect it will be a complicated thing if you, yeah, sort of have a good case of why you do it and you prepare it well with a notary or a legal advisor. So, yeah, so it is possible.
I'm part of a small organization that set up a stichting, hoping to channel money to our artist community. But actually, we would be much more interested in becoming for anything. But we are concerned that the funders won't accept it. But really, what you're saying is that
It's if you read sort of if you really look at the fine print of most funds, they will all say stichting of vereniging. And the non-profit part is what is important.
is what and instruments and you are a vereniging.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, quite like personally, I think also I don't know a lot of the problems and sort of yeah, with code of conduct violations and stuff that we have seen, I think, is a result of this monolithic structure of stichtingen, where a few people have a lot of power and make all the decisions. So yeah, if you organize in a less hierarchical way, I think you have less of these sort of like issues with abuse of power. So and yeah, if I was looking at certain funding results, I was like, yeah, it seems that actually this model of one guy deciding everything in organizations is not what the future will be. So maybe that's a hopeful thing.
Thank you for your presentation. It was very, yeah, informative and practical, which is really good, I think. I think I can imagine for recent graduates or those who are forming collectives or have kind of found themselves in a peer group or mutual, yeah, mutual support, often the next step would be applying for funding, as you said within the presentation, but often coming up against the fact that either they apply for things individually and get paid as individuals, as in the sense they get paid as an individual, as a collective, like they can't apply for multiple fees or things like that. And then this step to become this sort of formalized association or sticketing is quite a jump. It can be quite intimidating, costly, a lot of investment, a lot of time, a lot of commitment. And do you think there's any way that there's a possibility for funding organizations to actually, rather than going through these formal structures, find sort of this middle ground to pay people fairly within these collectives? I don't know, do you know where I'm going here? Like kind of a middle ground that doesn't require this formalization, but is this kind of step in between to allow sort of fairer distribution of funding between collective work, which doesn't necessarily mean that you have to formalize, because this is always the case that it has to be formalized, it has to grow, you have to, this idea of growth is always there. Yeah, it doesn't always necessarily fit the structures that actually people want to fit within.
Yeah, I guess it's particularly an issue when it's like short-lived collective work, or like if you don't plan it for years to come, but maybe you want to do something together for one project or a year. I mean, I think simuleringsfonds, you can have one person apply and like within the project you pay for everyone. Maybe with Mondrian that's more difficult. Like project-based funding. Yeah, so I don't have a direct answer to it. I guess yeah, it depends a bit per fund, like how complicated that is and what they accept and don't accept. I mean, you have some. I don't have a lot of experience, but there's also some ways to do collaborations as eenmanszaak, as freelance entities to make a maatschap, but I also don't know how complicated that is.
Go from an individual, either being an individual to being an organization, and there's no like, and then being up against many different organizations, from to Apple to anything, yourselves, II. So there's no kind of in between stage that is not necessary even for producing exhibitions, more for just working as a collective. I think there's starting to be a few bits of money there to sort of encourage collective work, but I mean, is there maybe, you're not the right person to ask because you're not a funding body, but maybe if there's a funding body here.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, with IAI, I think when we started to apply for money, it was also not a huge amount. Like, was doing smaller projects together and more like project based, and then we started doing like an annual program for many years, and then so was sort of going step by step in that sense. So I guess yeah, if you plan to work together for a longer time, it's worthwhile to actually create that association. And maybe if I don't know, if you are a bunch of curators who want to organize certain types of projects, I guess it can also, in terms of like how members join and leave again, you can make that more fluid. So the entity stays, but the people in it are moving. So yeah, I think it's really worthwhile to actually spend that time to think about what you want to do together and sort of do this longer, like yeah, thinking for the longer term. And yeah, maybe that's also something. Yeah, and how you organize, like with AI, we do have a lot of sort of day-to-day business, but we also have moments like, so we have monthly member meetings, which are more about ongoing stuff. But then we also do a retreat, actually 2 times per year, like one for 1 day and one for 3 days, where we spend time together. So it has a very social, important function. But it's also the moments we sort of look a bit sort of like we take a step back, we go to a different place and see like, okay, where do we want to go in the future, and sort of really talk more about the vision and the further future. And that's also really important to do with an organization.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm gonna round it up, right? No more questions. Then we're gonna go a small break and we will set up the panel discussion. It will be a panel discussion by multiple organizations that do a lot of work for us as artists. And they will it will be moderated by Zoë Dankert, and she will lead you through this conversation where you get insight in how they started up, why are they there, and how does it all function together, and how can we strengthen ourselves and them. Their strengths? Oh.
That's why so consistent.
So yeah, so please take a cup of coffee and we see you back in at 4.